butterfly in the sky. I can go twice as high. Take a look, it's in a book.
Mike's Reading Rainbow.
I can go anywhere. Friends to know and ways to grow.
Mike's Reading Rainbow.
Hello everyone, this is Mike Rowland with the Rowland team with another book review. Today I will be doing it on Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. It's an awesome book. It's probably one of my, between this book and one other, best book so far I've read this year. This book is pretty cool. It goes over just basically how, in a nutshell, how an outlier is basically someone who stands out, basically the 1% of the 1% of the 1%, the top tier, people who are just excellent at their craft or whatever their trade may be. You know, we're talking like the Bill Gates, the Beatles, people who are just the outliers, people who are just different from the average, and it kind of dives into why. And you know, a lot of times we think that it's genetic, you know, especially when it comes to like brilliance or strength or whatever the case may be, that we just inherit this ability from maybe, you know, our genes, our family, and of course that plays a part. But this kind of dives into it. It's a lot of separate case studies. Every chapter is like a different case study, so it's kind of neat. But it goes over just basically how we're fortunate, or a lot of people are fortunate enough to just grow up at a certain time. One particular example was in Canada, how they have hockey's huge out there in Canada, and they kind of dive into how they were looking at the all-star team of the Canadian teams, the developmental leagues, as before they get to like, you know, the high school level, I think in that range. But and all of them happened to be born in like January, February, March. Maybe one might have been born in December, but like almost 80 to 90% were born January, February, March, and that was just ridiculous. It was kind of an interesting thing. So they dove into it, and what it ended up being was at an earlier stages, especially in Canada, they all start at the same time. So if you're born at a certain age, regardless if you're born in January or December, you're grouped in with that age class. So, you know, when you're 6, 7 years old, you haven't developed, you know, you're going against a kid who's born in January. When you were born in December, there's a pretty large gap there. And at that age, you know, that's significant. And what happens is in Canada, because they were better, the ones born in January, February, March, because they just happen to be older, even by a couple of months, they'd advance to the better teams with better coaches, with more games. They just get more practice in, and then it snowballed. Same thing with schooling in a lot of cases. Another case study was schooling in general. When you start later, your brain hasn't developed, so you get a late start. And it plays a big part. So it kind of breaks down. Yeah, genetics have a lot to do with it as far as who we are as people, but also our culture. And you know, just how we're raised, and just the advantages that we had. It talks about the Beatles, and unbeknownst to a lot of people, the Beatles started where they were playing every day. These guys together had so much hours in collectively that when they were ready, when they actually started to play big time, these guys had it down to a science. That's why, you know, they're the Beatles. That's why. Same with Bill Gates. He had, before, you know, computers were an everyday thing that we have now. Very limited people had access to it, and he did. He was one of the people. So of course he's brilliant, but in addition to that, he also had accessibility to computers before a lot of other people did. It goes over in general how if you want to master something, they say the magic number is 10,000 hours of practice. There's really no exception. If you really dive into it, no one just kind of hits the ground running and is just perfect. Of course, there's naturals. But in order to truly master something, even, you know, someone like Beethoven, he just didn't pick it up. It took 10,000 hours of practice. So if you want to master something, truly master something, 10,000 hours is the magic number. At least that's what the book goes over. A couple other things, just, you know, to bring up as far as just kind of being lucky when you were born. If you were born in the 1930s and you were a lawyer, for whatever reason at that point in time, especially, I'm not going to go over in great deal about the book, but there's a handful of lawyers that just excelled. In 1955, especially, that's when like the software program became a thing. The Bill Gates and everybody, there's like 3 or 4 guys, just multi-millionaires that we know about today, but they were all born within 2 years, like 1953, 1955. That's when, you know, the software was coming and becoming a thing. 1835 is actually they did a thing where 10% of the world's richest people of all time were born in around 1835. That was when America was kind of getting going, and just like to be an entrepreneur around that time was just, there was so much advantages, and there was so much economic growth happening then, to where if that was something that you were doing around that time, and again, 10% of the entire world came from America during 1835, and I thought that was pretty interesting. But yeah, goes over to this guy named Christopher Langston. He highest IQ of all time, and he's basically as a farmer's boy, doesn't really do much. I mean, he's a brilliant guy, and it's clear. But at the same time, I mean, as far as like accolades, accomplishments, he hasn't done much just because the culture wasn't there for him. He didn't have the tools. He kind of grew up in a rough childhood, and even though he's, from IQ standpoint, smartest guy walking potentially of all time, just did not have what other people had at their disposal in order to, I guess, breed success. Also goes into Korean Airlines, how for whatever reason, for a long time, it had nothing to do with the airplanes, had nothing to do with anything. It was just their culture, led to Korean Airlines being a really, really sketchy airline to fly. They had a crazy high figure as far as airplane crashes over anybody else, and it goes over why their culture played a part in that. Very, very interesting book. I definitely give it a read. It's just interesting. It's a good read as far as just obviously, genetically, some people are smarter than others, stronger than others, but we also have to understand that culture plays a huge part, and that kind of, it dissects it from a bunch of different case studies. But yeah, give it a read. Definitely recommend it. Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Really good author. Get that. Give it a read. But yeah, that's my book review, guys. I hope you're having a great day, and take care. Bye.
Look, it's in a book.
Mike's Reading Rainbow. Mike's Reading Rainbow. Reading Rainbow.